So I just stitched on this vein on my wagon wheel or my ship's wheel, and it looks great from this side all the way. But then when I turn it over to see how I did, I can see that I stitched right on the stitch line because I did it from the fabric side with my 1/4 inch foot. I'm a little bit off here, and that's okay because it's in the middle and it doesn't have to match up to anything. But look at this end. Whoops. I stitched past that stitch line. And so now this vein, when I go to match this up to the piece right next to it, I'm going to have a hard time matching that up. So I'm actually going to pull these stitches out and re-stitch this because that's really important. So first you have to put tape on the paper side because you don't want the paper to fall apart and be compromised. So I'm going to just put tape on that part. I'm actually going to go in, flip it over, and I know that it's small stitches because I'm on paper. Once I get that first stitch off, I'll be able to pull this and start using my blade. Now I've got a camera in front of me, so this is hard to do with a camera. And I'm just hitting the stitches with my blade, and I can pull. Wow. This was the one I glued? No. There we go. Okay, so I only had to pull back a little bit because I just want to make sure that the end is matching. And so now what I'm going to do, try to get these stitches out of here. I'm going to glue that. And I'm going to do it from the paper side just to make sure that I'm actually on that line. And now I can restitch it. So it's really important when you're doing a vein that you're right on the line on both ends because that's where you have to match up your pieces when you're putting them next to each other. So that's my little tip for putting on veins. Make sure you're stitching on the lines. So I'll just continue by pressing this out, trimming it all the way around. Now I've heard from people who have forgot to trim the piece all the way around, and then they trimmed away their papers and stuff. And then they had to go back and buy new papers to match up and make the piece fit. Now this piece, after I was done paper piecing, I trimmed the unit to the outside edge all the way around. But I have to do that again now because I just put a vein on there, and that vein has to be the right size and shape. So even though I already trimmed the outside edge all the way around, I have to do it again so that my vein's the right size. So I'm just going to do it again. And then once I've done that all the way around, that last step, the very last step, is when we put this vein on, we had a lot of extra fabric in here. Like if I pull this vein back, I can see these big pieces of fabric back here. It's much bigger than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We don't need all that. And now we don't need the paper anymore either. And we don't need the basting stitch line. So if you were doing your basting stitch line at a 2.5, it's really hard to pull papers off of a 2.5 inch stitch length. So you're going to trim away the basting stitch line. So what I'm doing here, I am trimming away the basting stitch line. I'm leaving myself a scant 1/4 inch seam. I'm trimming away the stitch line, the extra fabric, the paper, everything, because I've already trimmed the unit on the outside all the way around. So it's already, this vein is already at the right size and shape it needs to be. So as long as I pull that out of the way, and then I can pull back the vein, I can get rid of, you can see my basting stitch line there. I'm cutting it away. I'm getting rid of it. So now when I go to pull papers off this, I don't have to fight with pulling them off of the basting stitch line because I got rid of it. I just have to pull it off of the really small stitch length that I used when I did that seam. So that is my tip for veins.